Singed is weird. Even by the standards of the era he was released in, when champions were rarely anything more than archetypes personified as characters, this guy always stood out as one of the most bizarre champions in the game. I mean, when you think of concepts like mad scientist or deranged alchemist, what do you envision? Probably something like Victor Frankenstein, Doctor Doom, Sho Tucker, etc. What you probably don't envision is a skinny, bald man in armor running around with a spiked shield the size of his body and a giant bottle of poison strapped to his back. Now, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with me when I say that Singed is in dire need of a VGU. But the question you have to ask is, what direction should a VGU even take him? Visual gameplay updates are meant to bring an old, outdated character up to League's modern standards, giving them a new look that better fits the themes and concepts they embody, while also fleshing them out as characters. While some are handled better than others, there's no denying that when you look at a typical VGU in League, you can see the direction and intent the creatives at Riot were going for. Let's make Fiddlesticks a genuine horror monster rather than a parody of one. Let's turn Nasus and Renekton into divine beings rather than just aliens who look like Egyptian gods. You get the idea. The issue with Singed is that his gameplay doesn't really seem to fit the character at all. And yet, Singed is so iconic because of his existing kit, that changing it would be controversial unto itself. I mean, in a game with over 100 freaking characters, it's hard to make every single one stand out. And yet there's no one in the game who plays quite like Singed, a champion literally designed around running away. There's a reason why Don't Chase Singed is an unofficial rule. The man's built around the idea of baiting enemies into chasing him when he's at low health, then killing them with the poison trail that he spews from his back. The rest of his moves are all about flipping enemies behind him, putting down adhesives on the ground to slow pursuers, and giving himself a huge movement speed buff in case someone actually gets too close. It's an interesting idea for sure, but it still wildly contrasts with the character as he exists in the lore. As established before, Singed is a mad alchemist, whose sole pursuit is the perfection of his craft no matter what. He has no qualms performing inhumane experiments on living creatures if it deepens his understanding of the alchemical arts. And Singed has even gone as far as creating weapons that would violate the Geneva Convention just to fund his research. He's not a fighter, and he certainly doesn't seem the type to get his hands dirty if he can help it. He certainly isn't the type to run around Zaun in this ridiculous getup for the hell of it. I mean, if it came down to it, maybe he would be willing to down some of his own potions for self-defense. But if that were the case, you'd think it would be something more like Shimmer, so Singed can just hulk out on his adversaries for a bit. Needless to say, it's a complicated issue to tackle, one that's pretty widely known in the community at this point. Trying to blend Singed's in-game appearance and his kit with his canonical self is tricky, to say the least. That said, I do think there's one way you could make it work. While it's hard to imagine Singed behaving like he does in-game under most circumstances, I feel like it could be justified under one particular situation. After all, Singed's kit is all about running away from enemies, and there's a character Singed has close ties with who's all about chasing people down. One of the many crimes against nature Singed has committed in his career is the creation of Warwick, a former gangster transformed into a cyborg werewolf. In canon, Warwick was discarded after he seemingly perished in the transformation, only to be revived by the chemicals pumping through his bloodstream. Now, Warwick is roaming blindly through the streets of Zaun, hunting down anyone unfortunate enough to cross paths with him. Warwick's gameplay is centered around being a wolf on the prowl, ambushing and immobilizing foes with his ult, and gaining bonus movement speed when moving toward wounded enemies. In other words, Warwick's kit is, conceptually at least, a sort of counter to Singed. But what if it was the other way around? The Alchemist's short story ends with him returning to his lab after it was torn apart by Warwick. The Beast clearly wants revenge and was just shy of getting it. Singed has since moved to a new laboratory somewhere else, and has begun trying to track down his escaped creation. Singed knows that just as he's hunting for Warwick, however, Warwick is hunting him. So wouldn't it be smart to use that to his advantage? Perhaps Singed could design his entire ensemble around trying to recapture Warwick. Give himself some protective gear capable of enduring the beast's claws for a time, throw down adhesives to slow his adversary down, and of course, leave a trail of poison behind as Warwick tries to track the scent of blood. The Insanity Potion, his ult, could even be a last resort for Singed to flee his pursuer if things get too dire. Now, obviously, there are still some changes to be made. The entire design of the armor needs an update, and the giant bottle of poison is still ridiculous. I know Singed is more about chemicals than machines, but maybe he could pick up some kind of exosuit, or hell, turn to the glorious evolution for augments. I think that would tie in nicely to the connection established between him and Victor in Arcane, even if that show was only regarded as semi-canon. As for the bottle, just make it a machine that spews poison at the press of a button. Easy. In conclusion, Singed is weird, but he's not unsalvageable. His gameplay is thematically the polar opposite of Warwick's, so all you need to do is lean into that. Just have a short story about Warwick chasing Singed, in which Singed uses that kit to evade the monster he made. You could say it even ends with him luring Warwick back into captivity, setting up the next potential story for the uncaged wrath of Zon. But this is just how I'd go about it. What do you all think? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.